Let's walk and talk about hatred. The emotion, but much more importantly, the upcoming video game. It's being developed by Destructive Creations, what I believe is a Polish developer, using the Unreal Engine, and it is a first-person shooter that is attempting to shock the sensibilities by depicting extremely realistic massacres of innocents. Some cops and things like that, but mostly civilians. I am not going to overlay any of the footage, both because it's incredibly disturbing, but also because I'll probably get a copyright strike. But if you go down below the like button to the description, I'll put the video there and you can take a look at it. But I do have to warn you, it is extremely graphic. And I've been playing video games since I was a little kid, but hearing people pleading for their life as the protagonist of this game pumps bullets into them or slits their throat, that's pretty rough. And so because of how rough it is, there's been many editorials written about it in the past week or so, questioning if it should exist, if it should be put on services like GOG.com, should it be on Steam, questions like that. And I've been thinking a lot about it, and I'm a little bit torn on a couple of points, I'm going to be honest. I've played, as I said, a lot of video games ever since I tried to get a floppy disk shareware version of Doom to load onto my grandfather's PC that only had a 5.25-inch floppy drive. I mean, I've slaughtered all sorts of aliens and robots and people as well in games like Grand Theft Auto and Halo. But there's something about seeing it where the entire purpose of the game is to kill innocents. Both in the trailer, he admits that they're innocents. The developers, in talking about it in interviews, are talking about how exactly that's what they want to portray. That does make it feel a little bit different, and I don't know if it's just because I'm getting a little bit older and I have more experience with more different types of media, both in gaming and outside of that. I don't know. Now, I will say up front, I do think that it should be allowed to be sold. They're not breaking any law, and certainly if we were to censor it or to try to petition to not get it on any kind of service for sale or anything like that, well, that's potentially starting a slippery slope towards other sorts of games being shut down where either there's a little bit less violence towards innocents, or, it's just a game where you can play that way if you want, like in Grand Theft Auto. You can play, fairly by the book, just killing criminals, or if you want to, you can run down pedestrians all you want on the road. I don't want to criticize games in that way, but there's something about it that bothers me. And if you read the interviews by the developers, they talk about how they're just trying to make something that's deliberately not PC, that's honest about what it is, and that doesn't, I guess, deceive you about its actual intentions as they imply other games do. But I think they're mostly just trying to be sensationalistic because they think that it will sell. I think that they think that because people will hear about it, because they know it's going to be covered in the media, that more people will buy it, or that they can appeal to what seems like a not insignificant number of young, mostly but not entirely males in the United States and abroad who are consumed by hatred, like the protagonist talks about in the beginning of the trailer, like perhaps the Santa Barbara shooter. I mean, what the guy says there is pretty much what's in most of these manifestos. But at the same time, while this trailer in particular, the gameplay footage that they show, does seem especially egregious, especially violent, at the end of the day, there is nothing fundamentally unique about this game. This is not the first game of this sort. There have been games throughout history. I mean, Postal, like I've said, Grand Theft Auto, there's a lot of violence like this. There were mods for shooters that would have like Columbine as a level that you could go into. So there have been extremely violent games for a long time. Both shooters, but also fighters and RPGs as well. Games with extremely graphic sexual content. And by the way, since I consider games to be a legitimate art form, they're not a totally unique thing, and we can talk about other art forms that have things like this. I mean, is this really any worse than the Serbian film, or Human Centipede, or Hostel, or any of the other sort of torture porn sorts of experiences? I mean, they're basically trying to show you something that no human would normally come across in their day-to-day life. And I think that you can make the case that there's some artistic value to that being exposed to something that you would never, as a normal, empathic human being, you would never actually do in your day-to-day life, there might be something to experiencing it and being able to see it and then distance yourself from it. And so I think some people will play this game with that in mind, but I think that we're lying to ourselves if we don't think that this is going to appeal to a lot of young people who are very mad at the world, who don't feel like they fit in, and they're going to gleefully shoot down innocents. There's nothing fundamentally illegal about that or fundamentally wrong about that, and certainly I'm not one of these people that thinks that playing these sorts of games makes you violent, gives you the impetus to go out and actually commit violence. But it does bother me on some level. I mean, if people want to play this sort of thing, that will create a market and games will be made, but I do wish that there was a market for more, I don't know, positive or uplifting experiences as well. I mean, personally, I guess I don't really play games like that. I suppose I mainly play things like Shadow of Mordor recently, League of Legends. You know, I'm heavily invested in Star Citizen coming out. But I don't know, I like Star Trek games as well, and that certainly portrays a universe that's a little bit more positive, I suppose. So anyway, let me just reiterate, I don't think it should be outlawed in any way. I think that they should be allowed to sell their game. I know that Steam is probably not going to list it. I know that it's going to get attacked a lot when it finally comes out. But I think that, if nothing else, it's opening up an interesting debate for us to have. It's generating something for me to talk about in Walk and Talk, which is fun. But right now, I'm still working through my feelings about it. I don't know that I will actually try it out for an updated video on the topic in the future, but I'm interested to know what you guys think about it. Take a look at the trailer if you haven't already. Leave a comment. Do you think that you could ever, even just for curiosity's sake, play this game? Is there something wrong with someone who's very enthusiastic about playing this game? Let me know what you think about it.